with kind of a high level, what do we know about talent today? And these are some things that I think we're all faced with. Certain, very, very basic challenges, but and I say basic, not that they're not complex, but they're basic in as far as we have a certain number of boomers, baby boomers retiring. That generation has started to retire already, 10,000 people per day, and we have 45 million people to replace them, which means we have a math problem. We have the Gen X's and the Gen Y's, and as much as we might think sometimes they are from a different planet, they're not. They are people with slightly different values compared to what the boomers might look like, but they still have a tremendous amount of value and potential, and we've got to figure out how do we keep the best talent, how do we make sure we help grow our existing talent, and a lot of it is finding the potential of the people and making sure that we're certainly pushing them forward. So it's very clear the demographics are changing, and if you look at the how long people stay in their job, it says 3 years here for under 35 years old, but in some cases, and of course you probably read and review many resumes. If you're in a hiring position, you know what it looks like, and we're seeing 1 year, 2 years, 3 years. So people do move around. We've eliminated the loyalty factor in most companies, not intentionally, but we allow people have 401ks which they can transfer, take with them. We have to remain and stay a mobile, a flexible workforce. So sometimes there are layoffs, and that sort of loyalty factor has vanished a little bit. So what we have to do is we have to work harder at making the environment we have more conducive to hanging on to people. This is just I like to throw in, they say never throw in charts and data into PowerPoint slides, it's too boring, but I threw it in here anyway. It's just to show you that don't take it from me. There are other experts out there that talk about what's going on, and if you look at this particular survey, it went back to 2010, 2011, and it hasn't changed. It's actually getting worse. Executives were asked, how hard is it to find good people? And the numbers are pretty staggering, and you can see the size of the company. So if you're a 50-person company or a 500-person company or greater, it's still a pretty significant challenge. And the larger the company, the more attrition you're going to have, voluntary or involuntary. But the idea here is how do we make sure that we hang on to the people we need. Another factor here to consider, and this is from the U.S. Bureau of Labor Statistics, is people are more willing to quit their jobs than they used to be. So this goes back to December 2014. It's actually going up. So I talked about voluntary and involuntary. Here are some statistics to support it. So I'm going to stop boring you with statistics and move on to what do we do? How do we fix this? How do we mitigate this challenge? And there are really 4 things you need to do to have a consistent talent management strategy. And we're going to talk about each one of these in detail. And this is where I want you to make sure you have your worksheet handy as we talk about each one of these. The first one is recruiting top talent. You have to make sure that you bring in the right people for your organization, not just for skills and experience, but also for their core behavior, fit to your culture. Do you have the people you want to bring that you need coming on board? You have, and a big piece of that is predicting past behavior. So predicting behavior for the future. We'll talk more about that. The second thing is you want to make sure they are engaged. Bring them into the organization. Onboard them effectively. Set expectations very clearly. Look for potential in people. Organizations that work hard at coaching, developing people, looking for hidden potential are the ones that are going to reap the benefits in the long run. The third thing is development. You have to make sure you are developing people. It's great to identify the potential, but don't think it's going to happen by accident. What you want to do is you want to be sure you have a very specific and defined approach to helping people see and understand their own potential, but also taking it to the next level and developing that. And then, of course, you've got to retain top talent. And I say retain the best, upgrade the rest. There is a chance you're going to lose some along the way. I mean, that's pretty normal. We'll talk about what's okay, what's not okay there, but do know that there's going to be a war for the top talent, not the bottom talent, but for the top talent, and those are the people you want to keep. The chances are, like I say, you won't keep everybody, but if you create the environment, and we'll talk about how to do that where people want to stay, you're going to be in a much better place. And the costs of hiring are staggering, as I'm sure everybody knows. All right, so what I'd like you to do is get your hands on your worksheet. It looks just like this. There are going to be 4 areas. I'll give you an opportunity to fill in each area. And I want you to think a little bit about your environment. So let's talk about recruiting, and we talk about hiring the right people. If you reference Jim Collins' Good to Great, they talk about getting the right people on the bus. And the right people has more to do, even though we say skills, experience, behavior, and interest. People have to be interested in what they're doing. They have to have the skills. But the greatest indicator of success is based on behavior. Does the individual you're hiring have the right behavioral profile for the role? Because everyone has core behaviors. Things like assertiveness, manageability, decision-making ability, their attitude, not good or bad attitude, but their approach and how they see the world. Are they more skeptical, or are they more optimistic in terms of the view of the world? And there's no good or bad in any of this. It's, do they fit the role? Do they fit the requirements of the role? What does the role need? The second piece is know what you need. I mean, it's very important to establish a clear understanding of what talent you need today, but into the future. Many organizations think about succession planning, but they only put that into the category of the senior management team. Well, if you think about it, the senior management team is going to have leaders to succeed them. That will come from middle management. Those roles will be vacated. You're going to need leaders coming from up underneath the organization or in the lower ranks. Make sure you have a plan for long-term success. What are the key roles? Who are the people that can actually fill these roles? In the past, it was easier to go outside, hire from the outside. Hiring from the outside is good. You want to bring in new blood once in a while. That's going to become more and more difficult because of the numbers challenge I mentioned earlier. But it's also very important to encourage people to want to succeed within the organization. It's an incentive. People enjoy it. People are looking for a greater challenge. So you want to make sure that the organization understands what are the roles we have today, which ones are critical, how do we fill those roles. But you could take that across all aspects of the business. It doesn't just have to be leadership roles. It could be roles that are critical to the success of the business. You do have people today that have tribal knowledge that is not written down anywhere, but is critical to the business and business success. You want to ensure that there are people who are being mentored by those people, where there's knowledge transfer. So you want to be sure that you need to know what talent do we have today, what are the roles that are critical, what are our immediate needs, and what are our long-term needs as well. And then you have to structure your approach to bringing people on board. If you don't have a clear understanding of how to do that, many organizations just interview. That's not good enough today. You have to be very clear on what is the role, what are the core and key competencies required for that role. What I'm finding today, and my advice is, don't put as much emphasis on hard skills. Those can be, you can teach those, you can send people to a course for those. Those are easier to learn. What is not easy to learn or adapt to is behavior. So if you define a behavioral profile up front for each role in the organization, for example, if you said for our salespeople, for our sales representatives, this is the role description, these are the responsibilities, and here's the behavioral profile we're looking for. This is the one that will provide us the best opportunity for success. And you match everyone up against that particular profile. Critical. You also want to have a very structured hiring process. You want to be asking the same questions consistently. And I do, when I train organizations or help organizations or just provide advice, I insist upon a behavior-based interviewing process. An assessment is a great tool because that will uncover certain aspects of behavior, but the interviewing process is even more important. So whether it's one person interviewing or a group interviewing, you want to plan out the questions very specifically based on the previously defined characteristics that are critical for success in this role. So if you want to put your hands on your worksheet, and the first question is, how effective are your recruiting practices? And what I'd like you to do is think about each one of these areas. Are you effectively looking at hiring the right people based on their skills, behavior traits, and interests? I think that's number one you want to consider. Two, do you know what roles are, do you know what your needs are today, but as importantly, into the future, and how far are you looking out? And then do you have a clearly structured approach to hire people through the behavior-based hiring process and through some sort of pre-hire assessment approach? I'll give you just about 30 seconds or so just to jot a few things down. Where are you doing well, and what do you need to improve? And if you only want to jot down the things you need to improve on or the areas you need to focus on, that's fine. Go ahead, I'll give you a shot there. About 30 seconds. Go ahead. About 10 more seconds. Okay, hopefully you have something written down there, something that you can take away from that aspect. How can we improve our recruiting process? And you'll see in the screen here, it says the cost of a bad hire, 1 to 2 times annual salary. And that's not my analysis. That the Saratoga Institute, part of PricewaterhouseCoopers, defined that, and they looked at all different aspects: lost opportunity, training time, anything related to the onboarding and hiring process. And they're saying, look, if you lose somebody within 3 to 6 months after hiring them, you're losing 1 to 2 times the annual salary, which is pretty significant. And we don't see those numbers show up on a profit and loss statement, but it's built in there, and that's certainly something that everybody wants to avoid. Just something I want to point out here: we use a tool called the Profile XT from Profiles International. This is not a commercial for them, but the tool we use will actually assess people based on 9 behavioral characteristics. So you'll see on the screen here, you'll see the 9 characteristics, and there's a band there from, you'll see 4 to 7. In some areas you might see 3 to 4. It's the blue bars, and where the person actually lines up after they've taken the assessment is the slightly larger bar. And what it does, it tells us how well does this person map up to the behavioral profile that we defined for this particular job. I don't remember what this particular job was, but it's going to be for a particular job. And there's no good or bad, regardless of where they line up on the actual band. It's not important. Do they map into the behavior profile? That's a critical piece. How far out are they? Is that an indicator, or is that a concern for their success? These are the types of things that you can do. First and foremost, during the interview process, these are the types of things you're going after. You're trying to understand, what is the behavior I need, and then you ask questions in relation to that. That will give you your first indication. This is another line of, if you want to call it offense or defense, in understanding how people will behave in the future. This is a great tool, and there's many of them out there. I'm not trying to sell this one to you by any means, but just know that those tools do exist, and I'm a big fan of this particular one. Let's talk about the second part, engagement. The term employee engagement has been around for quite some time, and I think sometimes it's misunderstood. It's sometimes misused and misunderstood, but engagement is not something you do to your employees. This is something that leaders do. This is how they behave to create an engaging work environment. Feeling engaged is what employees feel. It is the leaders in the organization who create that feeling through their actions and the environment that they create. And these are the 4 elements that, when we teach organizations about engagement, their question is, well, how do we create a more engaged culture? A more engaged work environment. Well, you have to consider 4 distinct areas, and there's more to each of these areas, but this is the high level. Number 1, direction. So we say, chart the course for employees. Tell them what's expected of them, be very clear how they fit into the big picture of the organization, how their contribution matters. People need to know and understand how their contribution matters and is valued on a day-to-day basis. Now, you may not be giving accolades or feedback every single day, but they know they're working hard every single day. They want to know that what they're doing is going to have a contribution for the organization. It matters, and what they're doing is appreciated. They also want to know how they're doing, and this is where direction has a lot to do with, have we effectively set the expectation for the employee? The culture, creating a work environment. Culture is just that. It's the environment where people work. It's how they feel. It's how they feel about themselves. Again, this all comes back to leaders. How do leaders behave towards their employees so that they're going to feel a particular way? Now, I know people in organizations saying, "Look, we have to get the business result." Yes, you do. But the business result is a function of how well people feel connected and committed to the organization. And if you want that, you have to create that environment where people are willing to perhaps take risks, where they're willing to make a decision when you're not there. You want to ensure that you've got people in the right place, in the right state of mind, so they're performing at the levels you need them to perform. So if you think about creating a work culture that drives engagement, it's Are leaders communicating effectively? Are they sharing enough information? Are they consistent in their communication? Are they holding others accountable? Pardon me, a better way to think about this, are they holding everybody accountable equally in a fair way? Employees are not afraid to work hard. They just want an environment where it's fair, where they're respected, trusted, excuse me, and where they view their leaders as people who they can truly follow. Excuse me one second. Sorry about that, folks. Allergy season is here. The third piece, development. You want to provide professional development opportunity. Well, every individual, I don't care who you are, you could be the president, you could be the person sweeping the floors, you could be a midline manager. Everyone has opportunity for growth. It doesn't really matter. But if you're not being very deliberate about helping people grow professionally, that could be challenging. I've experienced some organizations just say, look, just go get what you need. Go sign up for a course. Tell us what you need. Well, that's good, and that's helpful, but a very small portion of the population feels empowered to do that, and it may have nothing to do with your environment. People sometimes don't help themselves. If you want to help people grow, you need to encourage them. You need to push them at times. Sometimes you need to lay things out for them. And I'm not talking about hand-holding. What I'm talking about is managers, leaders recognizing the potential in others, identifying areas of opportunity, recommending perhaps some training or some coaching, outside coaching, not the coaching that's listed on the screen here. That's internal coaching. I'll get to that in a minute. But helping people recognize what they need and encouraging them to go get the support to drive their own personal performance. Some organizations encourage people to go outside solely. Some organizations, many of the companies I deal with, of course, have outsiders come in and have leadership development programs or programs related to communication or something that's going to help them in the work environment. These are more structured programs. But those are the things that you want to structure, put in place for them. And it doesn't have to be a big deal, but what you're saying to them is, we recognize who you are, what your capabilities are. These are the opportunities we're going to provide you. And investing in your people is probably one of the best investments you make. It takes time, it takes patience and consistency, but it will produce results and create that engaging work environment. The last one is coaching employees for high performance, and that is just that. Leaders, one of the critical roles for leaders is coaching. Everyone is familiar with Jack Welch from GE. He's quite famous, written a number of books. In his last 2 years there, he spent most of his time coaching other leaders who were closest to him, to groom them for positions, higher positions, to take roles that actually to replace him. He was coaching people, but he felt and recognized that his greatest value in the last couple of years of his time at GE before he retired was to coach people. That's no different than any leader in an organization. Coaching people is taking an interest, a personal interest in an individual, looking for what they need, and spending quality time with them. And I'm not saying a ton of time, but quality time, whether it's impromptu, whether it's just opportunity that you seize when you see something good happen, something that needs help, or it could be even something more planned, more planful. But coaching is just that. It is having a purposeful approach to helping people grow and think about their own development. And if you think about a sports coach, any sports coach, what they do is they look at their team, they look at their team members, and they look to see who has the potential to go forward, who doesn't. Some people actually get cut on the professional team, big money's involved, but most of the time, even those who aren't ready, they sit on the bench and they're groomed. Now that doesn't happen in the business world, but it doesn't mean it means you don't bench them. What you do is you allow them to work in their environment, and you have to encourage them, that you have to help them see their potential when they don't see it themselves. These are the 4 areas that drive engagement. Now we do a 2-day training course on employee engagement. So what I'm touching on here is really the high level points, but I think you understand the elements that are critical. If you give people direction, you build a culture where people can achieve the things they want to achieve and reach their full potential. If you provide development opportunity, meaning the avenues, the vehicles for training and professional growth, and then the individual attention that people need, that creates an engaging work environment. People feel valued, they feel as though you care about them, and they are inspired themselves to go beyond where they are today to achieve greater things. This would be a good time to grab the worksheet, and we'll go to question number 2. How well does your organization address employee engagement? So take a minute. Think about how well you provide direction. And I don't mean broad direction. I mean, how are individuals in your organization, are they clear on what their responsibilities are, what they need to achieve, what their success looks like? Do they feel as though that they work in a place where they're valued, where they're respected? Do they have opportunity for development? Do they have those training opportunities? Is it made available to them? And does their manager take an interest in their personal growth, which is the coaching piece? I'll give you about 30, 45 seconds for this one. It's a little longer. Just jot down a few things that you think your organization can do to help improve the engagement in your company. Go ahead. All right, just a few more seconds. I've changed the slide here. We've all to a Gallup study. This was done a little while ago, so about 9 years ago, and almost 10 years. Well, yeah, about 9 years ago. And although slightly outdated, it still applies today. The Gallup organization did a study, and I forget how many companies were surveyed, but there was a big chunk. It was in the thousands. And they surveyed all these companies. There was actually 12 questions that they asked specifically to survey the organization. And what they determined were that there is engaged employees, and you can see the definition here. These are people that are truly engaged in what they're doing. They're passionate. They understand how they fit. There's the not engaged, which means they're doing the work. It's not that they're not passionate, but they're not as well connected to the organization as they need to be. And then there's the actively disengaged employees who are just darn old grumpy. Don't see the value. Might be just collecting a paycheck. Now, this doesn't mean that your company has 15% actively disengaged, because this is a kind of a national type poll. But I think what you'll find is you do have some actively disengaged employees, and these employees are ones that just really are absolutely disconnected from what it is the organization needs to succeed. And you can turn these employees around, there's no question, but engagement, again, it comes back to the leadership. What are the leaders doing to create a more engaged environment? And this particular slide talks about how much it's costing the U.S. economy, and it says between 287 to 370 billion dollars. That was back in 2006, so that number certainly has gone up. It's a big number, and there's an app, and part of this survey, I can't give you all of it here because we don't have enough time, but there was also a connection from employee engagement to customer retention. The more engaged your employees are, the more engaged and the more engaged your customers are, which means you're going to retain them. And that's where a big chunk of the cost comes from, is lost opportunity, lost productivity, and it's very, very expensive. So don't underestimate the importance of engagement and how your leaders can actually impact the engagement in the organization. Let's talk about the development piece. I do a lot of the development in organizations, both through executive coaching and instructional leadership development programs. These are the things that you want to consider if you're not doing them already. You can go outside and get the help. You can do it internally, but these are the things you want to think about. The first thing you need to do is you need to assess people. People need a starting point. Some people are lifelong learners, introspective on their own. They know what their strengths and weaknesses are. I would say, through my experience and through everything I've read, is that the majority of people don't know. They don't know where to start. If someone says you need to improve, they're going to say, well, that's great. Where do I need to improve? It's not easy. So you want people to understand what their core behavior is. Very similar to the tool we use for hiring, pre-hiring assessments. We can use that tool for understanding core behavior, but there's other ways to do it without having to get an assessment. You need to understand how people prefer to communicate, what motivates them. Are they results driven? Are they more team oriented? Are they more about inspiring people? Are they more quality oriented? People look at situations differently, and helping people understand who they are, a big chunk of it is behavior, communication style, how they connect with the world around them. And a 360, we don't do 360s with everybody, but we recommend it for leaders, especially leaders at a high level. What is the perception that other people have of you as a leader? Very important. Some of us are scared to death to get any feedback. Putting that mirror up, that's what a 360 does. But I would say almost everybody I've worked with who has taken a 360 has been very pleasantly surprised, meaning it affirms their understanding of what their strengths are, and they were pleasantly surprised by a lot of the comments that have come across in terms of how to help, because anyone who provides feedback on a 360 is not there to blast somebody, but they're there to help them, and that's usually what happens. There's the odd occasion where an individual has an unrealistic expectation of themselves or an unrealistic perception of themselves, and they get blasted by their peers, their boss, and their subordinates, but that's rare. It doesn't happen too often, but that's a very important part. What are people's strengths and weaknesses? Are they introspective, meaning do they see themselves for what they really are, and do they recognize that they need to improve? Then the next piece in this is look for your hidden talent. Look for the hidden potential. You have diamonds in the rough. Too many leaders are quick to dismiss individuals, and I think that's a huge mistake for a couple of very good reasons. One, everybody has natural capabilities, natural strengths. Sometimes they're in the wrong role. They just not maybe well suited to a particular role, or even sometimes to a particular manager or boss. I'm not a fan of moving people around constantly, but I think it's something to consider. But let's make sure you are truly understanding what can people achieve, what can they aspire to, and what is their long-term full potential. Like I said, you're not going to keep like I said earlier, you're not going to be keeping everybody forever, but the idea is, what is the runway for people within your organization? Is it a year, 2 years, 5 years, 10 years? I encourage organizations to think about that. Very important. We talked about succession planning early, so I'm not going to go too deep into that, but you really have to have an understanding of what does your organization need today and into the future. Succession planning is really a function of looking at key roles, What are the competencies in that role? Who could fit that role? What are the potentials? And you need a near-term, high potential fit, and perhaps some seconds and thirds, some backups. But you really want to have, especially for your leadership positions in the company, you want to have a succession plan that outlines key roles, responsibilities, and people who can fit those roles. I think of an organization almost like a Christmas tree or a spruce tree, where the stalk of the tree is your leadership, and the base of the tree. If you think of the base of the tree, the base of the stalk, it's very, very thick to hold up the rest of the tree. Well, think about your organization that way. Your leaders, the leaders at the bottom of the organization, there tends to be more of them. They may not have as much clout or authority, but there's many leaders at the bottom of the organization as it fans out. You want to make sure that they have a good solid basis to understand how to lead, how to grow into stronger leaders, how to move into middle management and then into senior management. And if you don't consider it that way, you're going to find yourself at some point wondering who's going to fill these roles. My goodness, we have 50-year-olds and people and maybe even 60-year-olds saying they're going to retire either tomorrow or in 5 years. How do we fill these roles? How do we make sure we have the ability to perpetuate the success of this business? And it's going to be a function of leadership. So make sure you're thinking about that as well. And then customized training programs. Whether you do it yourself, you get help from the outside, or you use internet-based resources, there are many, many ways. There is obviously the more traditional classroom style and the one-on-one coaching or executive coaching, but there's online e-learning, there's video-based training, there are all kinds of reading programs. Now, when we roll out our programs, we use all aspects, we use all pieces of this particular portfolio of capabilities, because we like a blended learning model, because people learn different ways, and there's different ways to reinforce it. But you want to have it customized. That's really the key word, or tailored to your company and specifically to those people who you want to grow. For instance, if you think about frontline leaders or aspiring or new leaders, their needs for development will be very different than middle management and very different than senior management. The fundamentals are the same, but how the dialogue and the content and the context is going to be very different. So you want to ensure that you are addressing the specific needs of the people there, and those needs come out of the assessment, which was the number one item there. So why don't you get your hands again on your worksheet. Question number 3, how consistent are you with talent development? Now, I use the word consistent because you're probably doing some today. You're probably, if not thinking about it, you're looking at different aspects of what's up here on the screen. But consider what you're doing today. Are you providing enough understanding of people's core strengths, weaknesses, and their abilities, the assessment piece? Have you identified who your high potentials are? Do you know who can fill which roles and which roles are most important? And then are you providing that opportunity, the customized training approach? Are you providing that opportunity tailored to those people who need it most? I'll give you another 30, 45 seconds and jot down those things that you think you can work on to improve as you move forward. Go ahead. Just a few more seconds. All right, so you've brought them on board. You've created an environment where people want to stay and are committed. You're developing them. You're giving them the opportunity for professional development and growth. Now you got to keep them. And through all my dialogue and everything I'm reading, it's becoming more and more difficult, because even though we've in the recent past come out of a tough economic time, that is changing. And I've been talking to companies for years and years about the war for talent. 10 years ago, hardly anybody was listening. Today, people are listening, and it's real. So, how do you keep them? I say on the screen here, no more golden handcuffs. And, if we think about it, companies in the past would throw money at employees. I'm talking about the top talent. Incentives, more salary, bonus, stock options if it's a publicly traded company. And as much as that is, compensation is very important to employees, it's not number one, and it's never going to be number one. And especially for the newest generation, where they're putting much greater value on, or higher value on, work-life balance. They want a life. They watch their parents work their tails off. Some of them, some of their parents having a hard time retiring today. They're saying, I don't want that. I want to be sure that I'm paid fairly for what I do. I have a work-life balance. I don't want the 80-hour work week that was created by the baby boomers. So I'm not saying compensation is not important. It is. People want and need money, but it's like oxygen to a human. It's not why we exist. It's not why we do what we do. We need it to survive, but human beings do exist for different reasons. So how do we get them to stay? So let's talk about some retention strategies here that are very, very important. First, decide what kind of company do you want to be, and I'm talking mostly about your culture. This starts at the top of the organization. It comes down from the highest levels, filters down through the organization, and the culture is established based on the behaviors of those leaders, de facto leaders, the thought leaders in the company. Excuse me. But the first thing you have to do is decide, well, what do we want it to be? If you talk to companies, they might have up on the wall their values, their value statement, their mission statement. Those are all good things, but is the company really living it? And that's very important. So first thing, decide and build consensus throughout the entire organization. What is it that you want to be? When you hire people, make sure you bring people in that fit the culture. The worst thing you can do is bring someone in who does not fit the culture. They might fake it. You might think they're going to be able to change. People really don't change a whole lot. They can adjust. They can get better. They can shave off some rough edges. But if someone really does not fit your culture, in the long run, it's not going to work. I've never seen it work, honestly, and it's just a matter of time. I say leadership must be valued. What I mean by that is the organization has to value leadership as a critical element in the organization to drive the success. I break up, or I think of leadership and management differently. And for those of you on the line who know me, I say manage the business, lead the people. Very important. And you lead people through integrity, competence, and compassion. You have to lead through a set of guiding principles. You have to be competent as a contributor, but mostly as a leader. People have to see you as a leader. Your leadership behaviors have to be there. And compassion is you have to care about people, not just people because you want them there to get the job done, but care about their needs, wants, desires as professionals in the business. So very important. So the organization must value leadership. The next point, I'm just repeating myself. I'm not going to spend any time there because you really do need to manage the business. Actually, let me just touch on managing the business. I don't want to de-emphasize managing the business. Under leading the people. Managing the business is critical. You have to have a clear understanding of where you're going, what you need to succeed, the processes, the systems that are going to support you, and the metrics that are going to tell you whether you're successful or not. That has to be in place. But let that be there in addition to as a support mechanism to leading the people. What should you do about the high value jerks? Hopefully we're weeding out most of the jerks in the organization, and if you know what I mean by that, these are people that dominate, tend to think of themselves only, are highly competitive, really for their own benefit, not for that of the organization. I mean, competition in a company is good, but it has to be healthy competition. And high value jerks, well, and when I say high value, I mean someone could be extremely skilled at a particular area of the business, or adds a particular value in some aspect of the business that seems tough to replace, but they don't treat people well, or they're not part of what the culture is really all about. You have to make a decision. Does their high value truly outweigh the jerk factor? And if some and don't underestimate the damage someone's jerkiness, if I can call it that. Don't underestimate how much that can hurt the organization and drive people out of the organization. And of course, reinforcing what we said earlier, that can be very expensive. Last bullet, very important here. You're not going to keep them all, and you don't want to keep them all. A little bit of attrition is good. You don't want to get into the double-digit attrition. You get over 10% a year. That can get expensive, and that's too much churn. But a little bit of a little bit is okay. Sometimes some new blood is good. Sometimes it's time for people to move on. They've achieved everything they can achieve in your organization. So don't feel bad if people are moving on, and if possible, move on in good faith and on great terms. You don't want to burn bridges. They don't want to burn bridges. Keep the door open for people to come back. Sometimes people need to leave and come back, and I've seen it many times. So do think about retention in a way that is, it's your responsibility, and people will find their own way, but you have to create that environment where people want to stay, where they feel valued, where they're not operating out of compliance, but rather they're out of commitment. And honestly, if you build an environment where people want to be, they will run through walls for you. I've seen it. I've experienced it myself, and it's a really strong and invigorating feeling. So this is the last question on the worksheet. How can you improve your employee retention attitude and practices? And attitude is a function of your beliefs, not just you personally, but others in your organization. What are the beliefs that you have about people and people's potential and retention? So take a moment, think about some of the things I've listed here. There's six things you can consider, or perhaps five, the first five. What do you want to improve on? What do you want to make? What do you want to do to help improve the retention within your organization in the long run? All right, about 30, 45 seconds. I'll give you a chance. Go ahead. A few more seconds. Now, I don't want to forget about perks. Perks are always important. We talk about rewards, recognition. Perks are important. They don't have to be money, but they certainly that certainly is part of it. Think about this was from a study in 2013 with over 6,000 managers and employees, and trying to understand what are those top perks that people are looking for. And this is a list I compiled from that survey, and I use a lot of my own experiences as well as input from my companies that I work for. And this is what people are looking for today. I mean, a benefits package is a big deal, especially for employees with families. It's absolutely critical. We are noticing people want more flexible work schedules. Those who are committed to the organization, you don't need to babysit them. You don't need to micromanage them. They will get the work done. If they understand what it is they need to achieve, they'll get it done. But you need to provide flexible work schedules. People are living busy lives. For those of your employees bringing up families, and I'm sure those of you on this webinar understand it can be difficult. If you keep people focused on the goal, the outcome, and not the activity, and you do what you need to do as a leader, they will achieve, and they will absolutely appreciate the flexibility. Recognizing people. Some people like monetary. Some people like cash prizes. Some people just like a quiet pat in the back saying what you did here was great. And you have to think about the company as a whole, but you also want to think about individually. And it's all going to depend on your company as well. What do they want? And if you think about a company trip, getting some of your top producers or top contributors together is a wonderful thing. Employees want to provide feedback, and feedback meaning they want to have a contribution into some of the decisions in the organization. And sometimes it's easy as just asking, hey, we need to make a decision on X. I'd like to get your opinion. What do you think? And they know that you may not follow every aspect of their feedback, but they're being asked, and they know that's valuable. That is critical. We talked about training and learning opportunities. Today, we operate in a lean fashion. We always have for quite a long time. I mean, we don't have extra workers standing around with nothing to do. Find that tipping point. When you can hire people, bring them on. Don't wait too long in that area. Academic reimbursement, especially the newest generation, they're always trying to improve themselves. They're trying to go, a lot of them want to go back to school. They want to get better. And, is your investment in them going to, are you going to keep them forever? No, but you will create an environment where people will say, this organization was helpful. They supported me. And believe me, word travels fast. Have you ever heard of the website Glassdoor? It allows employees to provide comments about their employers. If you haven't gone to Glassdoor, check it out. They want some direction on career paths. And last one there, a more casual dress code. I think I'm seeing more and more of that. Years and years ago, there was a lot more suits and ties, but I do a lot of work in New York City now, and even where you'd think, no, there's always going to be a tie, it's a lot more casual. So these are the things that you can consider. But I also like to just kind of end on a point. This is not easy, okay? It's not terribly difficult if you consider what you need to do. First of all, if you're going to create an environment that's going to attract but also retain the best people, you have to think about it. You've got to plan it out. This cannot be something that is done willy-nilly. We've gotten away with that in the past because the talent pool has been deeper. I still hear some managers say, well, just fire him, we'll bring on another one. We know it's not that easy anymore. And it shouldn't be that easy. We have to think about the company as a whole, the attitude that we establish, and the environment where people really want to be. So let's plan it out. Let's think about it. You have to create buy-in, and that's with all people in the organization. You got to build that throughout. It starts at the top, and it pushes down through the organization. You need the consistency. So all aspects of the business, you have to think about not just doing it this year. It's not an event. Some people think, well, we'll do this, it's done. It's never done. You always have to be thinking about how to create a stronger environment. And then the discipline needs to be there. The discipline is to overcome the challenges. It's not going to be that easy. You're going to run into hurdles. But if you plan it out effectively and you're disciplined in executing on your plan every single year, you will have great success. All right. Before we jump into questions, I think we might have a couple questions here. I just want to let you know, next month we're going to be talking about the coaching and mentoring piece. What does that really mean? So we're going to dig into that. We're scheduled right now for November 17th at 2 p.m. We'll be sending out invitations and reminders. Allison, do we have any questions that I can answer?
Yes, we do. And I also want to point out, too, that on Tuesday, October 27th, that's actually next week, we're having our first live event, too. It'll be down in Boston at WeWork South Station. If anyone has any questions, you can certainly email us, but it's completely free, and it's going to be something a little bit different than what you usually see us do. So if you're around, definitely come check it out. The first question we have is, what can you do with an employee that has lots of potential but doesn't seem to fit culturally?
Ooh, good one. If you've identified someone with full potential, you're probably thinking about skills, capabilities. I think what you can do from a cultural perspective, I think first and foremost, you got to figure out what is driving them, what is driving some of their behavior. Some of it could be a behavior that they can adjust, they can change, but you have to really figure out, is this deep rooted core behavior based on beliefs or past experiences, and figure out how to help them see what behavior, because usually fit to culture is about behavior and beliefs. And I think part of it is you got to get to know people. Oftentimes people are brought on board, they're not onboarded effectively. And what you need to do is you need to ensure that you know these people, you understand them, you understand where they're going, and how can we help them fit better. If they're just not going to fit, and it's having an impact on their performance, that's a decision you may have to make. But I'm always a fan of engaging people and making sure that they have that the organization is providing all the tools and giving them the benefit of the doubt.
Okay, and our last question is, you did not mention much about salary regarding to retention. How does it fit?
Well, yeah, I think I touched on it just a little bit, not a whole lot. And what I get at is salary is important. People need a salary to live. They want to know that they have upward mobility in terms of their ability to earn more. And I'm a big fan of tying growth and compensation to the company's performance. I think that's a big deal, because it's not just about the money, it's also about the company's performance. And it also tells people that what they're doing, it adds value. It adds value to what you're doing as an to the group you're working within, but it's also adding value to the business. And the company is saying, look, we know your contribution is important. We want to compensate you more, but we have to see the benefit from it. In addition to the salary. So look, if you can do these things, if you can help us achieve these goals, we could see an increase in salary or bonus or commission, depending on what the structure is. So I think it's important that you connect it to the overall success of the business.